This is Bob Balch from Fu Manchu, and you're watching Aftershock TV.
Okay, we're back here, Matt and Tom, Aftershocks TV. And so, Tom, let's get into our main discussion now, our main topic, whatever you want to call it for this week. I just read this thing the other day, Annihilator, the old Canadian thrash metal band, great band, Jeff Waters, obviously, great guitarist too. There's news out that he's now finished 3 solo albums, okay? And that he was saying, I guess, that he wanted to do something outside of heavy metal. Now, we see this with a lot, obviously, of musicians that do solo records, okay? And not just solo records, but they do solo records of music that's not what they're known for, traditionally, right? So I guess what Jeff is kind of signaling here is that he's got 3 solo records done. That's nothing has anything to do with metal, okay? So I guess the question I have, is it beneficial or even could be detrimental for artists doing solo records? And is it a good idea just to even do one to begin with? Okay, I mean, we could talk about maybe some some artists who have been successful with it, and there's a lot more that haven't been successful that have been successful. Right. I think that's pretty obvious. And this doesn't include now artists that are forming other, obviously, projects and bands. This is just a solo record, okay? So like, as I said before, when we were talking earlier about Kerry King, okay? So after Slayer, he decided he's going to call his band now Kerry King, okay? So, to me, I think, and just we were talking about with Schenker too, I think it's a bad idea to name, if you're going to do something solo, that's fine. But I think you got to give it a name, or you could even say Kerry King's blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like, call it something. I think by just calling it your name, I think it's a bit. Look, I think it's a big egotistical. I don't think there's anything really. I don't think there's really no other way to say it. I mean, because you've got to, if you think about it now, you've got to then you have to sell yourself your name, right? There's no brand, or everyone just knows that brand already, right? So if you're Kerry King, okay, like the good thing at least with Kerry King, right? He's playing Slayer music, okay? So it's like, all right, it fits what people know him for. When you think of Kerry King, you think of the music he's putting out. Okay, I get that, okay? But I think it's just not good for branding reasons. But there's some other, musicians out there, okay, that when they use their name and then they play something completely different, I don't know, man. To me, because like I said, most guys who do solo records, their name or their looks or whatever it is, their brand, I don't think is that sellable. And that's, I think, what happens a lot of times. I think they overestimate their worth and who in their name and what it really means in the whole, in the grand scheme of that particular band that they're from. And so, I mean, unless you've been in a monster band, like Kiss, for example, okay? We all know those guys all did their solo records, right? Well, it's different because they were just monstrous and they were all characters, right? So they, it was a different, once again, there was a branding and a marketing, to it. At the same time, they didn't call it, though, Starman or whatever, right? They called it by their names. But like I said, I think in their case, I think that was fine to do. Michael Schenker is another one. I think like he did have a little bit of his Michael Schenker. I mean, again, I just think it's not a good idea to put a solo album out with your name on it. My opinion. I got some other things, but go ahead. I want to hear your.
Yeah, let me just fix this goddamn light. Just leave this shit in because these are all like bloopers. So I'm in the dark. Nothing I can do about it. C'est la vie. But but I think I saw this come through and I said, okay, there's lots of stuff to talk about here, and it's very hard to get an exact kind of criteria like a solo artist and a solo band and whatever. And there's a couple. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to start off with Steve Harris, because when his side project, even though it's a band, this was initially touted as a solo thing for him. So whether it was going to be Steve Harris, Lionheart by Steve Harris, whatever, but it became a band. And has it been good, bad, successful? Well, he's currently on a UK tour now, actually, which is not probably heavily advertised over here, but his 2 albums, I think, are awful. I'm a huge Maiden fan. Like, I mean, just next level Maiden fan. I think his albums are terrible. I listened to the first one, bought it, excited by it. Steve Harris, goddamn, he can do no wrong. not good. And then as a result of that, I think I checked one song off the second album, which was released 4 years ago, and I said, that's it, I'm out. I didn't even go any further. Another one is Todd La Torre from Queensryche.
Mm-hmm.
So he called his solo album Todd La Torre.
Yes.
Well, it's Rejoice in the Suffering, but it's his, and that's a tremendous album, arguably
it's very good,
better than the Queensryche albums. So here's a guy who got it completely right. And I was looking at some of the reviews recently, and it was like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 9.5. And he wrote all the songs with another guy. So that's a real solo album. And I won't go through all this because it's too much, but David Coverdale. David Coverdale left, he was left Deep Purple in 76 after Come Taste the Band, and he went straight into his solo albums, which was Whitesnake 77. And this is where we jump around a little bit, Matt, because it's very hard.
Go for it. Oh, yes, it's hard. Yes.
Who's in a band. So he's either just left or just before, whatever. But Whitesnake was the name of the album before there was a band, which was released in 1977, which is a fantastic album. And then North Winds was released in 78. So he had 2 solo albums. Then he obviously jumped into Love Hunter and so on and so forth with Whitesnake. So that was a pure solo project. And then he released Into the Light, which is another good album, in 2000. So it's a prime example of a guy in a huge band, Purple, Whitesnake, and solo albums. And he's only had 3. When you think of the length of his career, he's only had 3 solo albums over the years. Jump around here a little bit. Bruce Dickinson. So there's a prime example of it. Just Maiden is ongoing. Bruce Dickinson right now in the Mandrake project. And I think Bruce Dickinson's discography or repertoire since what he's done over Balls to Picasso straight through Tyranny of Souls, the new one, I think has been stellar. A couple of doozies in there, maybe a few songs off some albums are, maybe not the best, but overall his solo stuff, I think it's excellent. And I've got tons here, like a George Lynch I mentioned, Kiss solo albums you touched on.
Well, see, Lynch, okay, not to cut you up, but see, Lynch was smart and named his band Lynch Mob, right?
Yeah.
There is no George Lynch solo, So we're talking about like the name now, right? We're talking
100%.
Yeah. So
and even obviously Corpse Grinder, George Fisher, Cannibal Corpse, whatever. And I'll finish on this one. Gene Simmons released a solo album called Asshole, and he was an asshole to release it because it's abysmal. It's an awful album. Obviously it was 2004, I think, but he released that obviously as a Kiss, as a Kiss were still an entity in 2004, 10 years from their retirement, and that's an awful album. But there's Eddie Vedder's another one. He had a couple of albums with and still released one a couple of years ago, which I think is a great album. Can't remember the name, but whatever. Earthling, that's it. But so there's again, Sammy Hagar, I could go on all day, but yeah, it's a great subject matter to kind of pull on,
Yeah, and what's interesting is, now when I think about it, and a lot of the guys you talked about, David Coverdale, Todd La Torre, Bruce Dickinson, right? These guys are all vocalists. Now, I think if you're vocalists, you could pull it off, because you got that range. And I think it's okay because it's like everyone's going to know, okay, we get it. You're going to do something different. And, so you're going to branch out a little bit. You're going to spread your wings a little bit more. Okay. And like I said, I think that's good. In a way, I think that's pretty good for a vocalist to do because you could showcase, like, look, I could sing, not just metal music. I could sing over some other types of music or types of rock or whatever it is. I think that's that's okay. I think if you're a vocalist. So I guess I'll change my answer there a little bit with that. But when you talk about like a guitarist or a drummer or somebody that's going to come out and release a solo album. Like I was talking about a year and a half ago, less than a year and a half ago, I interviewed Sin Kieran, who's the old guitarist from Ministry. And he's got a really cool band out now called Siglos, which is it's a like extreme, like I would say it's like a groove metal industrial / black, black metal vocals with a kind of semi black metal vocals. It's good stuff. Anyway, I remember talking to him, and he was saying, like, when he left Ministry, and he was writing stuff, and he was initially going to put together a solo record, but he was like, he's like, I'm not going to. He's like, I feel like he said basically like he felt like an egotistical asshole if he's going to go around and ask people to come and be on my solo record. And let's be honest, it's not like he's a household name, right, Sin? So, so he that's why he, I think, very wisely got himself a singer to team up with, and that's why they came together to form this band Seaglows he's got, and it's really good. And so, and that's my thing is, I'm going to go through a few things now. For once, if you're from a rock or a metal band, okay, now rock and metal fans, okay, they like band names, they like logos, they like mascots. They don't. I mean, when you just say someone's name, what you're not selling really anything like that. You're selling your face, and I guess what people know what you play. Now, if you're like I said, like George Lynch, I thought he did that perfectly. That's how I think you should do it. Now he's lucky; he's got a name that his last name fit well with a cool name called. Which I like that name. I don't care. It's not. I don't think it's racist, or I don't care what anyone says.
No.
All right. So
George thought it was racist for about 5 minutes until he wasn't selling tickets, and then it wasn't racist.
It's not racist anymore. Exactly. Of course, as we all know.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so he had his name and he came up with something, clever and okay, Lynchmont, perfect, right? It wasn't just George Lynch and there he is with four of the guys. Because I think a lot of times, like I said, metal fans, rock fans, are like comic books, like horror movie characters. Yeah. I mean, for these guys that spend their whole lives playing like one style of music, and then if you're like, I'm going to do a solo record and it's going to sound nothing like you know me for, okay. And then you start playing what? What do you start playing? Jazz? And I mean, first of all, no jazz fans are gonna come and buy your stuff because they don't know who you are because you're not from that genre.
Sure.
And then none of your metal and rock fans are going to come say because they don't like that. Really, they're probably not that kind of music. They might do it as just an overall fan. They might buy it to have a collection if they're collectors and so forth. But very, very, I don't think anyone's going to be sitting there listening to if George Lynch decided to do a jazz record and call it George Lynch. I don't think many people. You're going to get 30 people that are going to go see that show. I mean, maybe more than that, but
But a prime example of that right now is Mark Tremonti from Alter Bridge and Creed. He did the crooner thing, like the Frank Sinatra stuff, and he's advertising as Frank Sinatra. Now, I don't even know if he did an album because I have no interest in. He's a good singer.
I think he did an album. Yeah,
I think he did. He's a great singer. He's a great guitar player. He's very successful. Back on the road with Creed, Alter Bridge are a great band, and I saw Alter Bridge twice, I think, and I haven't seen Creed. And we spoke about Creed before, but that's a prime example of anybody in the crooner world. I don't know what that genre is called, laid back jazz, whatever. They have no interest in what he does because they don't know who he is. Yeah. And there's not a metal fan in the world that's going to have an interest because if you don't like the music in the first place, I don't give a shit who's singing it. So Mark Tremonti doing his solo stuff, good luck to him. But if he was playing across the street, I won't go and look at it.
No, of course not. Exactly. I mean, and like I said, it comes down again to, I mean, even just from a business perspective. I mean, let's take someone like Slash, right? Well, that's a cool name. He's not calling his band Saul Hudson, his real name. He's calling it Slash. That's his moniker. Yeah. That's his stage name. Yeah, it's a brand. That's one thing. That's perfectly, I think, fine. I mean, that's what. Yeah, but I just if you're coming out with, we can go through some. Let's just give some examples, okay? Just so. Now there is one person, obviously, who did that and was probably the most successful person ever to do it. Is Ozzy, right? But even with Ozzy. He was known as Ozzy, right? Once again, Slash Ozzy. Even though it's Ozzy Osbourne, he had already a cool day. He didn't call himself John Osborne, right? That's his real name, right? So he didn't come out there and here's John Osborne solo. I mean, no, it's silly, right? Yeah. Let's think of some other ones I think that did a good job. But Ross the Boss, right? Not calling himself Ross Friedman. No one's going to buy if he was just Ross Friedman band. No one's buying that shit. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Now that like I said, Latori's, that was a good one. One guy who came out's done pretty good solo, I think, is Jerry Cantrell. He's had some good solo stuff.
Yep.
And one guy who I thought had this is the prime example when you should not name your band your name, because this guy has put out two really good records. Monty Pittman. I don't know. Have you heard his records at all?
No, I have not. Nope.
So you know who he is, Monty Pittman. Yeah. I mean, you've seen him, right? Yeah, he's been on Skull Sessions and stuff. Madonna's guitarist. So I get. Maybe him wanting to do that because it's like, well, I'm Madonna's guitarist, right? Yeah, but no one knows who Madonna's guitarist is.
Nobody.
No one knows what the pop star's guitarists are. And those records are really good. Those Monty Pittman records, man.
No, I don't know them at all.
Well, there you go. But because you don't know, because there's no branding or marketing to it. Who's Monty Pittman? It's just a name. And it's like if you would have put a band name under that, okay. those records, and if Metal, because they've gone Metal Blades, they put out both of those records. I guarantee you, I'm not saying it would have been huge, but I'm saying it would have definitely. I think he would have been able to continue to tour and maybe put out more records on Metal Blade. I mean, that's it. He hasn't. I think that was back in like 2018, might have been his last record or so, for something like that. But so I mean, once again, I mean, some guys who did terrible soul records. Chris Cornell, awful.
Yeah,
Billy Corgan, awful.
Awful. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Now, of course, let's look at someone like a Ronnie James Dio, right? Okay, that's one thing. If maybe you call your last name. If it's a cool last name, you got Dio, right? That's cool. 3 letters. Yeah, cool logo. It's not Ronnie James. It's just Dio. Just like Van Halen or just like Winger or whatever it is. It's just Stephen Pearcy. Okay, there's a guy who's had that's a good, but once again, he's the voice. I think if you're the vocalist, you can get away with it, especially if it's similar type of music that you're playing. It is easier,
Glenn Hughes is another one. I mean, Glenn Hughes, there's Purple.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had Hughes Sprawl, and then obviously Glenn Hughes came in. But Dio was smart too, because Dio obviously had the success with Elf, didn't have success, but obviously the 3 Rainbow albums he did, and he went straight obviously from there into Sabbath and Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and then I just read the Geezer Butler book, and he was talking about that breakup, and then went straight into his solo shit, and he came back in with Dio, but his name was so established at that point. And then Stand Up and Shout sold 1 million copies. He outsold Sabbath. So what a smart move that was for.
Well, remember too, and that's not his last name in real life, Ronnie James Dio. His last name is in Dio. It's right, Padavana, I think it is. So again, he's using a moniker, right? He's not using his real name. So that's totally, like I said, that's done. Obviously, that's why a lot of guys change their names for branding and marketing reasons, right? So I think it's a terrible idea. I think that's also a reason why a lot of the virtuoso guitarists have had trouble being bigger. Is because of that. Once again, Joe Satriani or whatever. I mean, these guys are phenomenal, right? If they would just put a band, look what Paul Gilbert did, right? When he put the band together, he put Mr. Big together, boom. I mean, once again, if you're in a band, you got a band name under you. Because think about it, when you think of when we hear a song on the radio or whatever it is, right? For the first time you hear band, okay. You're thinking of, these are a bunch of guys together. It's a group. It's a band. I mean, rock and metal people love bands. I do. I know I do. I'm just not really a big solo artist guy. Like I said, I just think that's a little bit too. I'm fine if you're a guy you're the only consistent member in that band. That's fine with me. That's totally fine. No big deal. Everyone knows, certain bands out there is that person's band. It's like, and they just get, people to come in and I mean, Megadeth right now, obviously. Right, I mean that's Dave Mustaine. He's not going to call himself Dave Mustaine. No, you just keep it Megadeth. I mean, you got the anyway. So, I mean, I can go on, I guess, about this, but I
think a lot of bands too, Matt, is that a lot of solo artists. I don't think they necessarily. I think do they have to release the in or whatever, or they have a contractual issue, but. Most of them must know going into this, and a lot of the bands we spoke about, this ain't going to sell shit. Like you're not going to come from a big arena selling band to being an arena selling solo like artist. Like I don't even think Todd La Torre toured on that album, because he probably said, no one's going to fucking come and see Todd La Torre. I'm going to go see. I would have personally, but if he's in that album, but obviously he doesn't have a discography to pull from. Obviously it's going to be mixed in with Queensryche or whatever. But I think they just do it because it's just something they have this 10 songs they've had in their drawer for 10 years. Yeah. They rework, remix them, get in a good producer, some guest players. Todd La Torre featuring or whoever it is, and it's just something to do. They know they're not going to make money off it. They know they're not going to tour off it. Or you might have some egotistical maniac thinks it's going to be a success, and it's not, because he's it's maybe a good album, but nobody cares. That's what the real feature. That's a great point you made. We as rock fans, we want bands. We want to see bands come into town, not really solo artists. I've seen both. I take a band all day.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I could think of that maybe using an individual's name, the musician's name, is it could be good for, like, say, touring. Okay, so for instance, if like, I'll just take a Vince Neil, right? Now, if you would have told, and normally I'd be like, I'm not going to hear no Vince Neil solo shit, no. But then again, if you're a Motley Crue fan, you're like, he's going to play those Crue songs. So it's like, okay, if you do see the name,
he tours, yep.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, with any of those guys, right? If any of those Motley Crue guys did a solo, even Mick Mars, well, you know, so, I mean, they're going to get up there and they're going to sing, you know, Crue songs. Now, especially if you're the singer. Once again, that's why I think as a vocalist, you can pull it off. You got the advantage because you're the voice. And so you can get anyone to back, you know, play, you know, the guitar, any of the instruments, but as long as the voice is usually the most important thing. I mean, it is, right? Let's
Yeah.
be honest. When
Uh,
you go to see a
and
live
actually,
show, you know.
I think you're right. The voice is, and that's what we're looking for. But Motley actually just thought of something that obviously with Mick Mars has his new shit coming out now, and there's a couple of
Hmm.
tracks released. It's pretty decent. Don't
It's
love it,
pretty
but
decent. It's
it's
okay.
okay.
Yeah, not bad.
But they're a band that they all have released solo stuff, which is that's unusual to have all four of the original members had a solo career. Obviously, Tommy Lee's Method of Mayhem, which I thought was just an abomination. Brides of Destruction for Nicky, forget about it. Vince solo stuff, some of the first two albums I think were decent. Again, I kind of lost track after that. I don't even know if he has any more. And obviously, he makes new stuff, so that's an unusual situation right there, with the exception of the Kiss thing, which is kind of a once-off management decision, whatever. So you don't really see all four members of a band doing solo stuff and having, you know, relative success playing clubs. I don't know who toured what, but I had no interest in anything that Motley did outside of Motley.
No, yeah. I mean, once
Zero.
again, at least Nikki Sixx, you know, it was the name of the band. You know, Tommy. Well, Tommy Lee's a good example because he did. Remember, he put out one Tommy Lee record, solo record. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah,
I did.
So,
Yep.
Methods of Mayhem though was actually the one that did better. Strangely, I mean, it was obviously you know, it was all the tech. You know, it was.
Well, I bought
90s,
that.
late
I
90s
so
stuff.
so I
Oh, you
yeah, I
did?
bought
Oh, it's garbage. Oh, yeah.
it's so bad. But I was a
Horrendous.
big Motley fan, and I said I got to
Sure.
check this out. And it's I think there's one good song. I don't know what it's called, but whatever. Yeah, it's not good.
And the reason also I say is, you know, Pat O'Brien. We talked about Pat O'Brien before. He says he's putting out a solo record.
I saw that.
I mean, come on.
Is he going to call it?
Come on.
Pat O'Brien sounds like an Irish farmer or something. You know, welcome on stage, everybody, Pat O'Brien. Like,
yeah, right. I know. Yeah. Well, there used to be there was a sportscaster guy here called Pat O'Brien for years, who's I think he's passed away some years ago. But that's why I think when I hear that name. But yeah, I mean, come on, Pat O'Brien. You really got to put out a Pat O'Brien solo record? You know, the only thing I can think of is maybe the guy did it when he thought he wasn't going to get any more gigs. You know, after he got you know, relieved from Cannibal Corpse. You know, but I mean, you know, once again, it's like, I mean, is someone really going to go pick up a Pat O'Brien solo record?
No.
Come on.
I think what it is for that, if that was a project, even if that was about to happen, that's just something to keep him busy. Project, just something to do, get it out of his system, knowing it's going to sell shit, not going to play clubs, and maybe he doesn't care. He just wants to release it, get a week in the headlines, and boom, it's gone.
That's fine, but they call it like, you know, POB or something. You know, POB, Pat O'Brien. I mean, just something that's just not just Pat O'Brien, like a name, a guy's name.
Yeah,
you know, unless you got a really cool name or you have a good stage name. I mean, like John Smith or whatever. I mean, no one's gonna buy this shit. They'll laugh at you, man. Come on, it's just, it's silly. Yeah. I think when guys like that, it's silly. It's just really silly. Call it something. Just call it. Everyone knows it's your music. He's called Pat O'Brien's blah blah whatever. But don't put it as it's going to be your name, man. I don't know. It's just anyway. You know, I can go on and on for you know with that.
But that was a good discussion, Matt. Just that overall, just pulling on it from different angles, and you know we put our own research into it. So and often a lot of these ideas stem from Matt and I talking about something. I go, dang, that could be a good subject the next time out. So you know, so kudos to you. That was a good one to jump into.
Well, you just mentioned something before that we're going to talk about probably next. I was writing down before. I don't know if you saw me. You mentioned something. I don't want to say it, but we're going to use that as a segment because you brought up a great, I think, topic that we could talk about as well. But yeah, this is how these things sort of, you know, just become, you know, they get conceived just from shooting shit, and one thing comes to the next, and you know, whatever. Anyway.